Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we have got a lot to talk about. We have a huge rivalry win for the Purdue Boilermakers. Wisconsin's winning streak in the conference, it's over. It's done. There's nobody left undefeated. If you saw our friend Casual Big Ten, he put out his circle of suck with the Big Ten because every Big Ten team is lost and the whole circle of it happening. So go check that out. And we're here to talk about it all. We're here to talk about, Brant and I, unfortunately, are Buckeyes. And, we're going to be kind, but we're also not going to be afraid to share our feelings. And I know Dakota has a lot of feelings to share tonight. So
I'll do it.
yeah.
I'll carry
Uh,
that mantle.
Very good. So if you're listening on podcast, I have Brant, CEO of Big Banter Sports, with me, and Dakota, the Boiler in Texas from Twitter, here to join us. Dakota, how you doing tonight?
Hey, can't complain. I messaged you when you invited me on saying that it's going to be real hit or miss here, depending on the results of the game last night. But here I am. So
I've been known to jinx people once or twice, so I'm glad I didn't jinx you.
me too, man. Me too.
That's fun. Brant, how are you doing tonight, man?
Yeah, on the flip side, the Buckeyes aren't looking too hot right now. So, aside from that, we're doing well. We're doing great. We've got our football team looking up. But this is the basketball episode, so excited to dig into some of what we've been seeing on the court.
This is the time of the year when the January slump starts to happen for Buckeye fans that we say there's more to life than sports, right?
Right.
So, all right. Well, let's get to it. Our very first game, we have Purdue beats Indiana 87-66. Big win for the Boilermakers. I kind of felt like this game was more competitive than the score indicated because of the fouls that happened. At least I should say this. With the starting lineups, it was more competitive than the scores indicated, but because of fouling and because Indiana just basically being outgassed and not having energy left in the game, and the Boilermakers pulling ahead, it looked a little bit more dominant. But I would still say at the end of the day, Purdue was the dominant team, and they won in this one fair and square. I heard some people complaining about the refs. I don't think you can really complain about the refs in a 20-point win, personally. However, that's what you're going to get when you play Purdue. It's really hard to guard Zach Edey, and your big guys are going to get in foul trouble. That's just the way it is. Dakota, what were your thoughts on this one?
I mean, what more can you really say about showing up to your rival's home gym and getting the largest margin of victory over them at on their home floor since 1934, when Purdue won by 34. So this was an absolutely dominant game from Purdue. This is the type of game that I was hoping that they would be able to put on the road in true road games. It seems like in true road games so far this year, it seems like Purdue's just kind of been waiting to get punched. You're going to get every team's best shot. And I think this is kind of the first true road game that we've seen that they really went out and they hit Indiana from the jump and they never really looked back. So I'm very happy with how this one ended up. Zach Edey, obviously you got to lead off with the big man, 33 and 14. I mean, ho-hum Zach Edey game, 33 and 14. But even then, shoots sub 50% from the field, 11 of 23, but goes 11 of 12 from the free throw line. I mean, what more can you really say? And then also Fletcher Lawyer, big game Fletch, shows up with 19 points on 4 of 4 from 3, 5 of 6 from the floor. And then Lance Jones, fully delving himself into this rivalry with 17 points and really just really letting the IU fans see what's up. But this is the type of game you expect Purdue to be able to go into. If you just look at Indiana as a resume and their metrics and all that stuff, this is how this game should have gone. But as you know, with rivalry games, you really never know what's going to happen. See, just even a year ago where Indiana obviously swept the series there, I can even admit it. So you really don't know what exactly is going to expect coming out in this one. But obviously Purdue was aided by we'll just say very and sometimes overly aggressive Indiana defense, getting their starters in foul trouble, and Purdue just walked away with it from there.
Yeah, I think, it was one of those games where, like you said, Dakota, Purdue was supposed to win, but we've also seen Purdue go to Nebraska and go to Northwestern. And while those teams are good, I would not rank those as top tier teams in the country right now. And although Indiana, I think they were at some point, I don't remember if they are anymore, outside the 100 of Ken Palm. They still are a good team with a good starting lineup. Now, the bench is a little questionable, but it still does make you at least nervous enough to say, are we going to have a repeat of Nebraska? Are we going to have a repeat of Northwestern? But I think Zach Edey just looked like this entire game. He was like, this is not going to happen. I'm going to do everything humanly possible to destroy this team and put my foot on them and just say, you're done here. Go go home. I guess you already are home, but stay home. We're leaving with the W. Brant, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, what was really interesting to me before the game was looking at kind of how Vegas had it laid out. Purdue was 9.5 to 10-point favorites on the road, which you just do not see in the Big Ten. You don't see it in college basketball, but especially in the Big Ten. The home team is always the favorite, and the home team usually comes away with a win. So that just speaks to how good Purdue is, and also how mediocre Indiana is this season, from top to bottom. And I think Purdue going out there and comfortably covering that spread, comfortably winning that game, really leading from start to finish. I know there was a little spurt where Trey Galloway started hitting some shots and Indiana kind of clawed their way back into it, but Purdue silenced him right after that. I think Purdue, and that, on a night where that happened and where Wisconsin went on the road and lost to a team that is barely 500, I think Purdue went out and cemented themselves back in that driver's seat of the Big Ten. Where people were saying Wisconsin in our Big Banter rankings this week, Wisconsin was number one in the power rankings, after Purdue had some slip ups and Wisconsin was kind of running the table in the conference. But this showing just went out. Purdue just went out and proved they're the best team in the conference, and they're a step forward from where they were last year as a 1 seed. This team, I mean, Lance Jones is just that much of an X factor, and he showed it in last night's game. I just think that addition really takes this team to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. We got casual Big Ten here in the comments with us. Rutgers down 1. I'll do updates, guys. 120 left. Nebraska up 3 now. And one cliff, 53 left.
Well, missing a barn burner over here.
No, I love the commentary, Kent. Yes, please continue. I have the game in front of me, but I would much rather listen to you than whoever's covering this game. I don't remember who it was at the beginning, but I think. Number one, if we're talking about commentators, I just love Robbie Hummel as a commentator. I think I told this story before, but my in-laws are huge IU fans, and they got tickets earlier this season, and they got courtside tickets, which was really, really cool for them. Well, they sat near the scores table, and they got to meet Robbie Hummel before the game, and it's pretty. You know that you're doing a pretty good job when my mother-in-law, who is just a diehard IU fan, asked for a picture with Robbie Hummel. Her husband was like, "Are you sure? Like, you want to do that?" And she was like, "I mean, he's a really good commentator. I know that he's from a place I don't like, but he does a really good job, and I respect him. So it's you're doing a good job when that happens." But anyway, I digress. I think this game was one of the most evident things this season, or one of the most evident games this season of what I've been kind of commenting on with Purdue. People talked a lot about Michigan during the football season, how they're like this boa constrictor and they really kind of suck the life out of you. That's basically what Purdue does to a lot of basketball teams. It is so easy sometimes going down the floor for Purdue, because there are times where Edey just gets a successful post up and just drives his guy to the back of the basket, gets the ball, turns around, puts it in. And then on the other end of the floor, you see the other team going just absolute max effort to even get the ball anywhere near the hoop. And then they have to go through 5 different passes to get it away from Zach Edey, and then do some kind of circus shot in the end just to score 2 points. And then Purdue gets the ball back, and then they just go right back down and pass the ball around a little bit until Edey's open and throw it down there to him again. It's unsustainable if you don't have more than your starting 5, and that's essentially who Indiana has, is really, when Gabe Cupps is out there, just their starting 4. When Xavier Johnson is doing his thing. I don't know what's up with Xavier Johnson. Dakota, do you have any thoughts? I know you're obviously going to have your biasness here, but feel free to have it. What in the world is going on with him?
Here's me taking off my bias crown, okay, setting it to the side.
Thank you.
This just has all the telltale signs of a 6th-year guy who's maybe hasn't had the end of his career kind of go the way he wanted to, and is probably starting to see that his time in college basketball is probably coming to an end. Playing for an Indiana team which last year had promise, but maybe wasn't quite as competitive as they should have been with the talent they had, to come back this season, get your 6th year, your final go around. I mean, he might try for another, but I doubt it goes. And then Indiana just slowly just backslides this whole season. You know, they beat the team that they should beat, but they lose all of their, I mean, they're 0 in quad 1 games with an average margin of loss, I think, of like 18 points in those games or something like that. And this just seems like a guy who is just frustrated. He's probably frustrated his career didn't go the way he thought it would. And I think we're just finally starting to see it kind of just boil over the top sometimes. Now, quickly, I'm going to put my crown back on. He mad that the Boilers boiled over in Bloomington. And I think, I don't know, it just seems like a kind of guy, the type of guy who's just kind of realizing that the end of a career is coming and might just be having a moment.
Well, and I think it affects him too. The Gabe Cups is starting, right? I mean,
yeah, but at the same time, he hasn't necessarily. He obviously was injured for a stretch and towards the end of non-conference. Obviously, a guy who's dealt with injury a lot. I'm sure that definitely doesn't help the staying mentally ready and locked into these games where, I mean, that just adds to the frustration. And then you see Gabe Cups, and now no problems against Gabe Cups. He's not the point guard that Indiana needs. This Indiana team needs, and you pointedly put it, it's basically everyone else in Gabe Cups. I mean, obviously Gabe Cups actually, I think, played a pretty good game for a Gabe Cups game. Hit a 3.
He had 5 points.
He had 5 points. I mean, you get a 3. Yeah, you get a 3 and I think it was a pull-up jumper. I can't remember what the other one. Yeah, a little jumper to get 5. I mean, that's a great Gabe Cups game. But if that's a great Gabe Cups game, that's got to be frustrating for a 6-year senior like Xavier Johnson to look at and go, really, this guy?
This is starting over me.
Right.
Brant, do you see Gabe Cups being the player that Indiana needs this season in order for them to make the tournament or have any hope outside of playing the regular season or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely not this year. But I did read into it a bit. And as far as why Xavier wasn't starting, I believe it was because it was kind of a punishment off stemming from the ejection from the previous game. So I think we will be seeing him back in that starting lineup soon, especially just knowing that you need that 6-year leadership out there rather than a true freshman starting if you really want to do anything. Gabe Cups, I think he has a lot of potential as a player. He's from Ohio, so I've kind of followed him throughout his high school career. And he was a very, very good high school player. Indiana fans were excited about him. But he's just, he's on the smaller side. He's a true freshman. You don't really see guys like that go out and have much success early on. But I think by his junior or senior year, he could be that point guard that Indiana needs to really make some noise. But it's not going to happen this year.
Yeah, no, I think that Gabe Cups has potential. And he's obviously, wonderful defender. He was giving Braden Smith fits out there at times when he was guarding him so close and doing a great job with that. But he lacks so much on the offensive end. I give him credit for trying more with the pull-up jumpers and the 3-pointers and stuff like that in this game because I think he realized that's what the team needed from him is to produce some of that offense himself and not just pass it and make those things happen. But at the end of the day, I think Matt Painter finally realized that Fletcher Lawyer is the guy you need out there. Braden Smith is going to do what Braden Smith does for this team. He's the point guard that they need in a lot of ways, and he continues to grow. But at the end of the day, there's just no comparison to the Purdue backcourt and to the Indiana backcourt. And although I think that Indiana's front court is better than some people give them credit for, when your strength is the front court and the other team's backcourt is better than yours, you're not going to win very many games against Purdue, especially if you don't have the backups to really make that happen. So, Dakota, you have any more thoughts before we get out of here on this one?
Just that yesterday, don't think it could have gone better. Obviously, Purdue taking down your rival on the road, never gonna feel bad. That's all I got. Feels good. Feels good.
I'm sure it does. Brant, you have any more thoughts?
Yeah. Only thing for me is back to the Robbie Hummel thing. That my buddy I was watching the game with is a huge Indiana fan, and he turned the sound off because he thought Robbie Hummel was so pretty biased.
Really?
So that was kind of funny. I didn't think he was. He just gets extremely frustrated at literally everything. He was screaming at the TV the whole time about the foul.
I get that. As an Indiana fan, I feel like Robbie does a really good job about being pretty
I thought he was
unbiased.
pretty unbiased.
Yeah, he's usually pretty unbiased. And some points, I feel like as most like former players are, can almost be a little biased against the team they played for. I thought Rob usually does pretty good, but I can understand watching that as an IU fan. Just anything Purdue, just get it out of here.
Right.
Yeah, well, and I think he was pointing out the fouls to a good rate. I said earlier that the fouls didn't decide the game. The officiating in this game still was bad. I don't think it was good officiating, which is, frustrating because you like to see good officiating. But at the end of the day, I've just accepted the fact that any game Zach Edey is in, there's always going to seem like there's questionable officiating because it's almost impossible to officiate those games just because of the size advantage that he has and the way he plays. And, it's almost like default foul on the other team because they have to grab and scrape and claw in order to get a rebound over Zach Edey. So yeah. But all right, let's move on to our next one. Well, before we move on here, I do want to remind you, please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. And if you're listening on podcast, please do give us a rating there, subscribe as well. All right, next one. Wisconsin goes down. They lose 83-87. Boy, oh boy, this was a heartbreaker for the Badgers. They played tough. I think Wisconsin played well. They were at Penn State, and Penn State had one of those games where they just. I think Wisconsin maybe led for a minute in this game or something like that, but they did not lead for long, and Penn State took the lead back, and they just kept it in this game. I mean, Ace Baldwin was fantastic. That Kanye Clary is a really, really good scorer, and they just made it happen in this one and really took care of Wisconsin. And we knew eventually it would happen, but I didn't think it would happen against Penn State. So credit to Penn State, but at the end of the day, Wisconsin's still really good. Brant, what were some of your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, honestly, I kind of saw it coming. The Badgers are kind of due for a loss. They're a good team, but they're not head and shoulders above the rest of the Big Ten. And Penn State also is they're a better team than people are giving them credit for. They kind of have a three-headed monster in the backcourt. You mentioned Ace Baldwin. I'd put him in the top maybe 3 point guards in the conference probably. And then Kanye Clary, a very underrated young player. He dropped 27. Just getting bucket after bucket. And Nick Hearn out of VCU as well, I believe, that Mike Rhodes brought him over. Not at that himself. He had 15 against Wisconsin. So if they can hit shots, they really can. We saw it against Ohio State earlier this year. They just kind of went lights out and took us down on the road. And Penn State, it's when you think of tough places to play in college basketball, you're not thinking of Happy Valley, but it's been tougher to play there this season. Yeah. It's been tough to play anywhere in the Big Ten this season, and Penn State's no exception. So to go and see them dominate from start to finish against Wisconsin, a little surprising, but didn't catch me completely off guard.
Yeah, and I think Penn State's backcourt really makes up for the offensive liability that the front court of Penn State can be. But at the end of the day, Penn State's front court is doing exactly what they need them to do in these wins. Now, sometimes they don't, but in these wins, they're playing good defense and they're getting rebounds, which is really what you want from your front court when you have an outstanding backcourt like what they have in Penn State. Dakota, what were some of your thoughts on this one?
I think this was... a lot of people, I think, could chalk this up to a down game from Wisconsin. But, if you look up and down their team stats, they out-rebounded Penn State by 11. They shot better percentage from three, a little worse from the field. But I think this was just entirely just a game where Penn State just went out and just beat Wisconsin at home. Obviously, you had a career night from Kanye Clary going for 27. You got Ace Baldwin going for 20. I think this really just came down to Wisconsin not being able to get the stops, because I think you saw routinely down the stretch the backcourt of Penn State just being able to get in the lane kind of whenever they wanted to. They ran really good action to get into the lane where they were either able to get to the rim or spray out to get good looks from beyond the arc, and they hit all the shots they needed to. And I think you guys absolutely nailed it, where this definitely isn't Penn State. I feel like occupies a weird space in the Big Ten where everyone just kind of looks at them as this just kind of not necessarily doormat, but you don't really think about them. But they'll get you. Obviously Shrewsbury last year put them sort of back on the map again. Obviously he's moved on now to Notre Dame, but I think a lot of people expected Penn State to take a step back and kind of just really overlooked them. But they got dudes, and what do you need to win in college basketball? You need good guard play, and Penn State got great guard play in this one. And I mean, you look at it, and that's all they needed in this one. They were able to get to the rim, get good looks, and got enough stops and rebounds to come out with a win. Good win.
And Penn State, I feel like, is kind of the shining example. Sorry, I was watching. Okay. Sorry.
All right.
I was watching
Okay.
this Nebraska game.
Yep.
Simpson traveled immediately back to Nebraska. I'm not doing overtime. Thank you, Kent. It is an overtime, so we'll have more to pay attention to here. No, but I was saying about Penn State. Penn State's kind of the shining example right now in the Big Ten of how you can really just essentially flip a roster, right? I mean, this was the Penn State team last year that was booty ball, good shooters, making all these things happen. And then now we have this incredible backcourt with a front court that, I explained them earlier. And then Leo O'Boyle, who, I love watching him out there play. He's really fun when he's hitting shots and doing a great job there. But when this Penn State team is locked in on defense, and that's kind of what they really go for in these wins, it's really tough to beat them. When they're at home, they play good defense. It's really tough to beat them, and Wisconsin was a great display of that in this one. I mean, they turned the ball over more than they pretty much have all year in this one, and although Penn State didn't get the offensive rebounds that they needed, they didn't turn the ball over hardly at all in this one, and it was a really, really good game for Penn State. Brant, you mentioned Ace Baldwin and kind of ranking him among point guards in the Big Ten, but I'm going to take it a step further and talk about the entire backcourt of Penn State. Is this a top 5, top 3 backcourt in the Big Ten right now?
I think you could make the argument that it's top 5. Top 3 might be pushing it. I have to kind of lay things out and kind of compare and contrast, but I think you could probably say pretty easily it's top 5, solely because of Ace Baldwin and then the emergence of Kanye Clary. If he plays a little more consistently, that can be scary as you kind of go down the stretch here in conference play.
Yeah, for sure. Are you as down, Dakota, on the Penn State front court as kind of I am with maybe their offensive efficiency in that area, or just overall? What are your thoughts?
I think it's hard, right? Because obviously the front court in the Big Ten is vitally important, and I definitely would say that Penn State's front court probably doesn't live up to probably the Big Ten standard. But that said, I think you're getting exactly what you can from Wahab and Hicks. Obviously, Hicks in this one goes 3 of 6 from 3 for 9 points. Definitely not going to be mad about that. Wahab just has that athleticism and length to bother opponents when they get in the lane. I don't think you're looking at those guys to go out and score per se. Obviously, you didn't need it in this one. But I think they're serviceable enough to be plucky at home, and you get them at the right time on the road. The longevity of this is kind of tough to say, but I think for this Penn State team, I think they're exactly what they need. Could they use a little bit more? Probably. As you saw in other games like the Purdue game where it was just lights out for Zach Edey. But obviously not every team in the Big Ten, especially this year, is going to be able to put a front court out against them. And you can expect to get that kind of performance out of them. So I think, honestly, while it could be better, yeah, I think for at least this team and the guard-oriented play that they're going to play specifically, I think they're exactly what they need.
Well, and as they continue to grow, too, right?
Also true.
This isn't a Penn State team that anybody expected to come in here and be top 4 in the conference or anything like that. So, I do want to touch on Wisconsin before we end here. Brant, is Wisconsin in trouble after this one? Did you see something about Wisconsin? You're like, ooh, I don't like that, or this could lead to maybe a few more losses. Are you down, or are you kind of still up there with like, yeah, Wisconsin's a good team, and this was just a blip on the radar?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're in trouble. I still think they kind of played their brand of basketball. It's kind of try and out hustle the opponent. They just simply got out hustled and outplayed. But I don't think they're in trouble. I think they'll be able to turn it back around. I think this is a good team. I think this is an experienced team. These guys were all together last year, aside from AJ Storr, and it's they play a lot of basketball together. I think if there's one team that's going to be able to bounce back from a loss like this, it's the Wisconsin Badgers.
Yeah, I think this is a team that Penn State just kind of got them, sleepy Tuesday night on the road, and that's a hard game to really counter when the other team is playing so hard. Dakota, are you kind of the same way we are, or are you a little bit different?
Oh, I mean, yeah, exactly. Obviously, Purdue's already got a couple of times just on the road. It's tough to win on the road in the Big Ten. I mean, say what you will about rankings and personnel and all that stuff. Going on the road, like you said, on a sleepy little Tuesday night, winter storm rolling through Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, probably. it is everywhere else. I think this is just one of those games that they went out on the road, competed. I mean, you can't say they didn't play well. They shot 44% from three. They got 5 dudes into double figures. I think this is just a game that Penn State just won. I'm not worried about Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of sleepy, it was pajama night there as well, so it really was
There you
sleepy
Lean
Tuesday
in.
night. Before we transition to the next one, do remind you we are brought to you by Big Banter Sports, bigbantersports.com. Go there for all your Big Ten media needs. Brant is the CEO of Big Banter Sports, so he's the man in charge, leading the charge of all of us. And not everybody you see on the Big Ten Huddle is from Big Banter Sports, but many of them are, and we appreciate all of our guests who come on, so check that out. And this one's going to be a little bit harder to talk about. Michigan beats Ohio State 73-65. I was going through it in this one. I tweeted before the game that, if Ohio State loses this game, they're fraudulent. Ohio State, kind of fraudulent. At the very least. I don't know. I know that I'm going through it a little bit more. I'm sure Brant has other thoughts and might be a little bit brighter. The hardest part with me in this one is, and I've expressed this before on the podcast, a coach like Chris Holtmann, I think Chris Holtmann is great. I think that Chris Holtmann is great off the court, and I am rooting so hard for Chris Holtmann because there are so many fans in the fan base who are against him. And even I myself am thinking to myself, is it time to move on or anything like that? But it's also in the portal era, it's like, if you move on, then you could lose half of your roster. Who knows? Bruce Thornton going to go somewhere? Is Felix Okpara going to go somewhere? It's so hard to decide. And at the end of the day, I just want Chris Holtmann to succeed so bad because, like I said, he is fantastic off the court, and he's a grade A personality kind of guy. And so for me in this one, it's like you lose not only on the road, but you lose to the worst team in the Big Ten. You lose, to Michigan, arch rival. Brant, I'm obviously going through it a little bit. Are you taking this loss as hard as I am? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's not an easy one to swallow, but at the same time, I think we have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt just because, it's a road game in the Big Ten. Yep, where you can't go on the road in the Big Ten and expect to win against anyone, even the worst team. I know it's probably we probably should have won, and one that can really, really hurt us when it comes to Selection Sunday. But you just really, and especially with what we saw last season, it's hard for Ohio State fans to swallow this one. Having that, hot start, the team looks solid, and then you hit Big Ten play, you win a few games, January rolls around, and you just start to crumble. And that's I think all Ohio State fans are kind of seeing that right now. So no one's optimistic about it right now. There's a lot of hate on Twitter and all over the place for Chris Holtmann. And like you said, I'm cheering for him big time. He's had success here. He's had teams that have been, he's had a 2-seed team. He's had teams that are ranked pretty high, teams that really do well in the Big Ten and finish top 4 in the Big Ten. He's been here for, I want to say 7-8 years. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if you crumble again, like this season, like you saw last season, he's not going to survive, and he's going to lose his job. But that could ultimately be worse for Ohio State because you're probably going to lose a lot of that roster in the portal, and it's going to take a bit of rebuilding to get it back to relevant. But at the same time, I don't know. It's a tough decision. But I don't want to put it all on Chris Holtmann. He's the guy. He's the guy who's kind of leading the charge for this team, so he's the one who takes the most heat. But at the end of the day, these guys went on the road and they shot 3 for 25 from 3. They were taking bad shots. They were giving Michigan every shot. I mean, Terrence Williams couldn't miss because he was wide open the entire game. And just ask Michigan fans how they feel about Terrence Williams. That they're not his biggest fan, but he absolutely lit our defense up. So I think there's a lot to be said about kind of the players playing the game as well. Guys are just cold right now, and they really need to start shooting the ball well, or the season's gonna get away from them.
Yeah, and at a certain point, I remember vividly the huddle back when Ohio State. Who'd they play 2 games ago? It was when IU when they played at IU. I remember Chris Holtmann saying to his guys, hey, you guys are gonna start hitting shots. Keep shooting. The shots are gonna come. You guys are great shooters. keep shooting. And at a certain point, I'm like, I love that he has faith in his guys and he doesn't, panic and change things, because sometimes we've seen that before where he panics and changes things, and what he changes it to doesn't go as well. But I think this is a team that Chris Holtmann really, really believes in. He believes hard in Roddy Gale and in Bruce Thornton. He believes in Felix Okpara, not just as a defender, but also as a scorer and a rebounder. And it's evident in that. And so it's hard, I think, for him to say that this is not going well. We're going to completely overhaul this in the middle of the game when he's seen it in practice, where he's seen it. I mean, Bruce Thornton said after the game, he's like, we watch a lot of film. We practice really hard. We do a good job. And then, unfortunately, right now in games, it's not showing up. And I think if the losing streak last year didn't happen, I think fans might be a little bit more understanding. But unfortunately, that's taking a huge toll on it. So, Dakota, you have the outside perspective here from us Buckeye fans. And feel free to comment as well as Michigan. I don't want to make this only an Ohio State thing, but what are your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, this was a weird one to watch. I mean, Michigan obviously having whatever kind of year you could say they're having off the court. That has kind of started to bleed a little bit onto the court, really. But in this one, it was an odd game where I kind of just always kept expecting Ohio State to kind of get going. Obviously, Michigan playing at home. I think this is, restarting Big Ten play, coming back after the break. Obviously, they're blessed by having Doug McDaniel be able to play in this game because it's a home game. It was very odd. And I think I put this on Twitter during the game, and I was like, it was such an odd feeling watching two programs in basketball like Michigan and Ohio State just kind of look like this. Like, it was a good game as a neutral. I did expect Ohio State to win this game. Michigan has looked like kind of just a dumpster fire floating down the road this year, both kind of on and off the floor. It looks like a program that just has no trajectory. And so to see them kind of not necessarily look like to break out of that based on it, I think Ohio State just did not play near their best. I would say probably not even near their average. But this was it was an odd one to watch for sure. And I don't really know how to quantify that into the stats, but I mean, obviously shooting 3 of 25 from 3, not gonna do good. James Battle 1 of 8 from 3. Bruce Thornton 2 of 7 from 3. Then you got an 0 of 3, 0 of 1, 0 and 2, 0 and 2, 0 and 2. And at some point, those shots are going to go down. I don't think Ohio State was taking too many contested shots. I think they were getting pretty decent looks, but this was just kind of a game that Michigan just kind of held on, and obviously you can't put it all of it on Ohio State. Obviously, Terrence Williams goes for 18. You get 20 and 15 from McDaniel, 15 from McDaniel, which I honestly didn't think Doug had a great game until I looked back at the stats just now and saw he had 15 on 50% shooting from 3. But this was just one of those games I think that Ohio State is kind of searching for finding themselves again. You guys mentioned that streak last year that kind of started around this time of year. It just feels like after non-conference and kind of looking into the bulk and the eye of Big Ten play, Ohio State just kind of floats away for a couple of weeks, and it's going to be very imperative for them, both as a program and as this team for this year specifically, to kind of find themselves and start, probably playing up to the level that people expect. I'll briefly touch on the Michigan side. I don't have a whole lot to say about Michigan. I kind of wrote them off pretty early on this year. And then once they did the whole Juwan Howard not coaching against Penn State at the Plestra, that fully checked me out on them this season. I don't know what's going on over there for that whole thing, but they came out. Obviously, they had the Fab Five back for the first time ever or something like that. So I think that probably amped them up a little bit, but I don't think Michigan fans are too invested in the season. And this was one of those weird games that just kind of came and went. And obviously Michigan comes out on top. But I mean, both of these programs are kind of on a teetering point. I think Michigan probably more so than Ohio State. Like you guys mentioned, I think Chris Holtmann definitely has the capacity to kind of turn this around. I think he's just going to have to, really nail this thing down and get his guys, back up to the level that we know they can. And time will tell, I guess.
Glad you mentioned the Fab Five. Did it feel like anybody else that it was almost like Juwan invited his buddies in to see him one last time?
100%. That's exactly what I thought. This felt like Jalen Rose texting the group going, hey, it's Joe-over. We need to get the boys back in town one last time.
I mean, it almost felt like he was like, hey guys, come in here and support me, and either it's gonna be the last time you ever see me. I think it was actually the first time the Fab Five had been all in there together.
I think so. That's what I saw.
But hey, come see me one more time, and maybe you'll help me save my job. I don't know, or something like that. But at the end of the day, it felt weird.
It did.
Did you guys see Jalen Rose's Instagram photo before the game outside of a liquor store?
Yeah.
No shame if you go to a liquor store. Obviously, we all need a
Hey,
drink from time to time, I guess. But just an odd place for Jalen Rose to take a photo and post on Instagram. Brant, did you have any thoughts on the Fad Five there?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan was playing like it was the Fab Five era, so um, shout out to that. But yeah, no thoughts for me. I mean, that era is over. Just like Jawan's tenure as Michigan's head coach.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll have one more chance to send him out in Columbus, but who knows if that'll happen or not. And I want to touch on one more thing, and this is an Ohio State thing. And Dakota, I'd like your thoughts on this, and then Brant, you can share yours. But Bruce Thornton, I want to start off by saying I love Bruce. I think that Bruce is a very good player, but I think Bruce is pressing right now. He had the worst plus minus for Ohio State in this game. He had a minus 16. He only had one turnover, so it's not like he was, crazy or anything like that. But only 2 assists, 19 points. That's fantastic. But it doesn't. I mean, Dale Bonner had 3 assists in this game, and he played what 13 minutes compared to Bruce Thornton's 38. I'm not saying that Bruce is selfish because I don't think he is, but it feels like Bruce is like trying to take everything into his own hands. And I truly do feel like Bruce is feeling the pressure on Chris Holtmann and kind of almost putting that on his own shoulders. You hear him after the game, he was basically trying to defend Chris Holtmann to the fans. And it feels like he wants to not only play for himself, but for his entire team, for his coach, which is all great. But it almost just feels like he's pressing out there and feels like he has to do it all by himself. Dakota, do you sense that as well? What are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I don't think you can blame him. I mean, he's probably definitely Ohio State's best guard. And what do we talk about all the time is you need great guard play to win, college basketball. And when you, as that guy, look around and go, all right, we're struggling. It's time. You got to get on my back, and I'll take you to the promised land. And obviously, maybe didn't get over the hump this time. But I mean, you can't blame a kid to look around, and you got to applaud him for, if this is the case, of looking around and going, all right, like we're struggling. We got to go. And I'm going to be the guy to step up and try and do that. Does that usually lead to some pressing moments and maybe overextending yourself just a little bit? I mean, potentially, yes. But if you want to take a long-term look at that, that's also the key to, these guys really taking that next step as his career continues. And I can't blame him. I mean, I think if anybody is capable of doing it, it's him. So,
yeah. You think the same thing, Brant? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are basketball is as much of a mental game as much as it is a physical game, almost even more a mental game, I'd say. And it does feel like Bruce is the number one guy that comes to mind when I think of players on the team who are taking kind of bad shots at times. And it feels like he's kind of in his own head. He feels the pressure and he's trying to put the team on his back. But at the end of the day, he needs to go back to what he was doing at the start of the year, taking open shots when you have them, distributing, driving, and just being that more complete player.
Yeah. 2 for 7 in this one. I think if Bruce just starts shooting better, they win this game, and that's a big part of it. And Jamison Battle too. I mean, he hit like 3 or 4 3-pointers the last 2 or 3 games or something like that. 1 for 8 in this one. So that was all of their 3-pointers. Rodney Gale went 0 for 3. Dale Bonner went 0 for 2. Oh, what were you going to say?
The Jamison Battle going 1 for 8 may have been my fault, actually, because Tim Miller from the Views from Shot podcast, he put out one of his banger bets, which is Jamison Battle to hit 3 threes. And, of course, I had to take him up on that. I'll take the blame on that one. Sorry.
So I didn't jinx Dakota, but you jinxed the Buckeyes. So, well, we understand. So. All right, we were going to talk about this Nebraska-Rutgers game, but there's 8 seconds left in overtime. Kent was done when overtime started, but we appreciate you, Kent. So we're going to go ahead and talk about Iowa and Minnesota. I'm going to get the graphic made for this game as the game ends, and then we'll talk about that one. So, but before we do that, do want to remind people about CBB Analytics. CBB Analytics is a great resource for myself. I get a free pro tier from them to tell you about it, and they also have free tiers that have wonderful content as well. So check out CBB Analytics. Really great resource, and like I said, even if you don't want to pay for it, they still give you great stuff. Check them out. All right. Iowa beats Minnesota 86-70. Iowa a little hot right now. They started 0-3 in the Big Ten, but now they're starting back up 3-0, so they're 3-3 here. This Iowa team, Fran McCaffrey, winningest coach in Iowa history, also after this one. So congrats to him. But this was one where Iowa just, like I kind of said before, is like their offense flourished and Minnesota didn't really have an answer for it. And eventually, when the offense flourishes like that, Minnesota started pressing a little bit and trying to keep up, and they just weren't able to. I think Minnesota's a good team, but they just weren't able to keep up with Iowa in this one. And it was evident and hard for them to do. But Dakota, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this was a game to me that I think said a lot more about Iowa than it did Minnesota. And I think I'm probably not alone in saying that Minnesota is probably performing a lot better than many people expected. But at the same time, I don't think it was necessarily fair to think that Minnesota was really going to compete as the season started to progress in the Big Ten. And Iowa, as like you said, has been absolutely rolling on offense. And in these types of games where one team is probably still trying to create their identity as a program in Minnesota, Iowa just comes out and just absolutely just takes it to them. And we have the offensive potential that Iowa does. I think sometimes that can just become just a little bit too much against a team like Minnesota. So I think this definitely says a lot about Iowa. Obviously, you get a great game from Crikey. Do we know?
I think Creaky.
I think Creaky too. That's what I always say. And then obviously Jimmy Dix gets 21 and Perkins 13. So this was just a very solid all-around effort from Iowa against a Minnesota team on the road. Now, granted, we've said that it's tough to go on the road and win in the Big Ten, but I think Iowa definitely brought the offensive, firepower enough to kind of just walk away with this one down the stretch. Minnesota kind of played with it for a little bit, but by the time the bulk of the second half got going, Iowa was kind of opening this one up a bit. So definitely a good win for Iowa as they're both teams are now 3-3 in conference, but I think Iowa definitely is carrying a lot of momentum right now.
Yeah, I agree. Brant, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, Iowa at the start of the season, they just weren't finding the bottom of the basket. And when you're a Fran McCaffrey team who can't score, things aren't going to go well because you already don't play. You don't have the defensive firepower that most of the other Big Ten teams do have. But they're slowly starting to come along. They can space the floor really well. Owen Freeman, I think, is a huge piece emerging for this team in the middle as kind of a Luka Garza type almost. Earlier on in Luka Garza's career, pretty similar, coming off the bench and coming just clearing the boards and creating some more space for the shooters. So that I could see him kind of following in that career trajectory, kind of the way that Garza emerged for them. But when they've got guys who are making shots between Perkins, Sanford, Dix, Creaky, they've got guys who can make shots and who can put the ball in the basket. And they're getting hot right now. Nobody wants to play Iowa when they're making shots because they can beat anyone in the nation. Going on the road and beating Minnesota, Minnesota's not the Minnesota of the past. This is a team they've got a bit of firepower with them. They're definitely playing better basketball than we've seen from the past few seasons. So it's a good win. It really was a good win for them.
Yeah, and I think Ben Johnson has done a good job with this team this season. I think everybody was kind of writing him off, hot seat, not really going to be the guy there. But I think Ben Johnson's done a good job. Dakota, do you have any thoughts on Ben Johnson and the job he's just done overall this season?
No, absolutely. I mean, he's done fantastically. Obviously, a 12-5 record. Granted, not against the best schedule in the country, but I mean, they were, I would say, fairly competitive in most of their losses. But I think he's done a really good job. I think there was a lot of question marks with him last year, obviously being his first year in Minneapolis. But I think he's done a very good job. He's given them a schedule to gain some confidence, and I think he has them playing with a lot of togetherness and a lot of confidence right now, getting into the bulk of Big Ten play.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that has been most impressive to me is the way he's utilizing Dawson Garcia this season. Obviously, Dawson Garcia was a good scorer last season, but just what he's been able to put around him, Elijah Hawkins sharing the ball, the way that he's been able to, and they have good guys that are coming off the bench as well. Farrell Payne, he wasn't a great factor in this game, and I think that contributed to Minnesota not winning, but he's been great this season as well. Mike Mitchell Jr. has been a good starter for them. He's giving you good numbers, almost double digits for assists and points in nearly every game so far. So I like what Ben Johnson is doing with this team, and kind of similar to Penn State. I'm thinking to myself, like, this team has potential and can go somewhere. It's just not their year yet. And I think that they were more likely to possibly make the tournament. I don't think they probably are. I think this is a loss that kind of, a home loss to Iowa in this one that kind of takes you out of that a little bit. But they could certainly go on a run and beat some good teams and make something happen. So, Brant, do you have any thoughts on the outlook of Minnesota the rest of the season, or Ben Johnson, or just how this team has looked this year overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think their season started very well. They didn't really have any big non-conference games. They had, I mean, the win over Michigan on the road was big for them. But really, when you look at the games they've played, I mean, they won at home against Nebraska. That's probably their best win. I think it's really just more of a testament of their schedule rather than how good this team actually is. And this just has all the makings of a team that the wheels are going to fall off. You look at their upcoming schedule; they play tomorrow at Michigan State, who's playing a little bit better. Then they play at home against Wisconsin. They play on the road at Penn State, who we just talked about, not an easy place to play. I think Penn State's probably a better team. Then you play at home against Northwestern, at home against Michigan State, on the road against Iowa. I would not be surprised to see them go 0-6 down that stretch. I really wouldn't. I think the wheels are going to fall off for this Minnesota team, and I think people are going to be talking about Ben Johnson the way they kind of were at the start of the season.
Would you say kind of like an Ohio State collapse in January?
It could be an Ohio State-esque collapse. It could be.
I got a joke about it, otherwise I'm going to go crazy. Dylan said to you, Dakota, a familiar face in the Purdue Twitter streets. So yes, Dylan, we bring all of Purdue Twitter, the Purdue Twitter streets over here to the Big Ten Huddle. And make sure they know that they're wanted and loved. I think at the end of the day, kind of like what I said at the beginning, Iowa just got rolling on offense, and there are very few teams in the country, not many teams in the Big Ten, Purdue probably being the only one, maybe Illinois. I think Illinois could do it too, but if Iowa was just rolling on offense and going on their streaks, then there's not many teams that can really keep up with them. Minnesota went on a couple good streaks. They had like a 10-0 run to start the game. They had a 7-0 run, I think, at one point. But Iowa, they just consistently were going and doing really good things. They had a 7 run, a 6 run, a 7 run as well for Iowa near the beginning of the game. But Iowa's just kind of one of those teams. They keep scoring and they keep making you press, and it's really, really difficult to overcome that. So, all right, guys, let's move on to our final game. We have. Oh no, I saved the wrong one. Shoot. Brant, why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can find you at while I find this.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely check out Big Banter Sports. We are all over Twitter. We are on Instagram. We are on TikTok, and we have our website where you can find out more about all of our podcasts within the network, including the Big Ten Huddle, yours truly. And you can check out blogs there as well. We are working on kind of firing up that end of things. So lots of cool content on the way, and also some new partners we'll be announcing here soon within the next week or so. So be on the lookout for that, especially Purdue fans tuned in. We've got something fun coming up for you also. Definitely keep your eyes out on all that.
Very good. Dakota, why don't you tell people where they can find you at?
Absolutely. You can find me on most social media platforms at Boiler in Texas, as well as right here on YouTube, Boiler in Texas as well, or you can search for the Runaway Train Sports Podcast.
Very good. There we go. Look at that.
Perfect timing.
Was perfect.
Look at that.
Sorry about that. So Nebraska falls to Rutgers. I looked like Nebraska was going to win in this game to me, and then it's like once we came on the air, it was like Rutgers just kind of turned things around. So I didn't get a chance to hear kind of the everything that was going on. But at the end of the day, Rutgers made a comeback in this one. They brought it to overtime. Some kind of crazy stuff there going on. If you read Kent talking about it in the chat, you kind of saw all the craziness of what was happening. And it's the craziness we love of Big Ten basketball, right? The late game shenanigans and trying to figure out what is going to happen, and the referee calls, the out of bounds here and there, just guys playing super hard. I still think that Nebraska is a good basketball team. I don't think that they are going to be hindered by this loss a ton. I mean, they beat Purdue, so that obviously is really helpful there for them. But at the end of the day, Rutgers is hard to beat, especially at Rutgers, and this was a tough one for them. Brant, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, really encouraging to see the way Rutgers battled back, because I think they may have been down by double digits or close to double digits in this game. Nebraska kind of in the second half, they pulled away there for a bit. So kind of surprising to see Rutgers be able to kind of claw their way back into it. We haven't seen it from them this year. But I mean, at the same time, it's playing in the rack. It's that kind of environment. It's going to get crazy. Rutgers is never out of it. You can never count a Steve Pikiell coach team out of it. So really impressive for them to go out and do that and kind of keep their season afloat, because if they would have lost this one, you would have had to seen the writing on the wall that their season's done. So really encouraging for Rutgers to go out and get the job done.
And we've been saying on here for a while now that, like, Rutgers, obviously this season matters. Nobody's saying that a season doesn't matter, but a lot of what Rutgers is doing this season is building for next year and what Steve Pikiell is doing. And Steve Pikiell went crazy in this game. He got a tee at one point. He was just yelling at the officials like crazy. It was unfortunate that Juwan Gary did go down for Nebraska, had a no contact injury, and those are never good. Wasn't able to put any weight on that leg, so a possible ACL tear or something like that. Hopefully not. We're hoping that it was just some kind of freak thing that he can get back out there. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, but I think that kind of affected it as well. Nebraska looked really, really good, and although they didn't drop off, I felt like the depth wasn't really there after Gary was gone, and they started to look a little bit more tired, and Rutgers kind of took advantage of that late in the game. Dakota, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Seeing those non-contact leg injuries never looks good. It usually, hopefully, we'll knock on wood that it does end up being okay, but those are always scary. And say what you will about staying focused or anything like that, you see one of your guys just all of a sudden just go down like that, it can take you out of it mentally. And while I think they did their best to try and stay with it, I think Rutgers definitely looked at that, smelled a little blood in the water, and were able to claw back, force overtime, and then ultimately come away with it in the end. So it's definitely a good win for Rutgers. I think Nebraska fans are probably going to be kicking themselves in the morning, letting this one get away. But that's life in in that mid pack of the Big Ten. You can't give them an inch, or they'll take a mile, especially playing at the rack. Purdue fans know all too well the horrors of playing at the rack here in the last few years. So you can't let them get going. That's a small, intimate little gym, and they will absolutely get rolling. So it's a win Rutgers absolutely needed. They still have a long way to go if they want to be in any sort of postseason play conversations. I don't know if this loss doesn't necessarily hurts Nebraska, but I think a win here would have definitely gone a lot farther than this loss will in the long run. So it's tough for Nebraska, but someone's got to win it.
Right. Brant, I do want to bring up, because he is just fantastic and astounding. Obviously, the whole Rutgers team had a good game in this one. There wasn't really anybody that you could point out to say that played bad or anything like that, but Cliff Amorie, man, 4 blocks in this one, 14 points, 15 assists. I cannot wait for when Cliff Amorie plays against Zach Edey, because both of those guys are just playing outstanding this season. Brad, did you have any thoughts about Amorie and his defensive effort or anything that he did in this game overall?
Yeah, I mean, Cliff is just an animal in the paint, and when you've got Nebraska, the way they play, Juwan Gary's kind of their guy in the paint, kind of their scrappy rebounder. So when he's out of it, that just kind of opens up more opportunity for Amorie to dominate in the paint. And he went out and did that. I mean, you get a classic Cliff Amore showing with those 15 rebounds, 4 blocks, 14 points, just absolute dominance. So that not surprising to see him go out and just go crazy.
Yeah, and he, one thing that he could really use to improve his game that Zach Edey has is free throw shooting. He was 2 for 7 in this one, so obviously that didn't have a huge impact. Rutgers were still able to win this game, but Dakota, do you have any thoughts on the potential matchup we'll see between Amorie and Edey coming up soon?
I'll say this: that's always a very fun one to watch because you talk about two just completely different types of centers. Obviously, Zach's 7'4", 300-pound beast, monster, mountain of a man. And then you have Cliff on the other side, very long, very athletic dude who just loves to go after every shot that's going towards the rim. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this goes. That said, Maury is definitely not the most adverse to personal fouls, so I think that's going to play a large fact in this one. I think even in his last 2 games he's had 3, and he had 3 in this one and had 4 against Michigan State. So I think that's probably going to be the story of that matchup more than anything. Obviously, we know the ability that Zach Edey has to draw fouls on the front court of opposing teams. So it's always a fascinating matchup to watch. I enjoyed it last year, and I'm going to enjoy watching it again this year.
And just you mentioned him a little bit there, Dakota. With Juwan Gary, like we said, we hope he's okay. But if Juwan Gary is out for Nebraska for an extended period of time, how do you feel like that affects Nebraska for the rest of the season this year?
Oh, I mean, that's tough. You got a guy who's been playing very well this year for a very incumbent Nebraska team that's kind of come on strong this year. Losing a guy like that is definitely going to hurt. I mean, you got to adopt the next man up, mentality. But with a program like Nebraska, you really got to question, the proven depth that they had. I mean, they didn't play too deep in this one, or definitely didn't get a whole lot of bench production in this one, especially at the forward position. So it's going to see who's going to step up, and if no one can, that's really going to hurt Nebraska going forward.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with it is, him and Rank Mass down there are kind of like a dynamic duo that can work together. And Rank Mass handles the ball more than I think people realize sometimes. And so if without Gary down there, is that going to pull Mass down to the block more and have him unable to do what he does with the ball handling some? Brant, do you have a take on the potential loss of Juwan Gary?
Yeah, it's sad to see him go down. I know he's dealt with not career, but season-ending injuries before. So tough to see that happen again to him. And yeah, I mean, he really, in my opinion, is kind of the glue that holds this team together. He does all the scrappy things. So to lose him, it's going to be significant. But I don't think Rink Mass is going to have to change his role. I think you move Josiah Alec down there into that role and kind of have him handle the rebounds, help get some room for Rink Mass and company to operate. He has experience winning. New Mexico. He was at New Mexico last year, and they didn't make the tournament, but they were competitive, and a well-coached team with Pitino out there. So I think he brings winning mentality to this front court, and I think Nebraska can keep moving forward and still fight for that tournament spot with him kind of replacing the Juwan Gary role.
What do you think? Do you guys think, and this is the last thing I'll touch on before we end with this one? Do you guys think Nebraska has a good chance to make the tournament, or do you kind of give it like a so-so, or what are your thoughts on Nebraska's potential to make the tournament here? Brant, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think they're going to be right on the bubble when it comes down to the end of the day. They're going to, the win over Purdue is going to be huge come selection day, but they're going to need to get another signature win or two, and they're going to have to win most of their home games, I'd say. Yeah. One more big road game. It's probably going to seal their fate.
Which is not easy to do in the Big Ten.
Not easy to do.
Dakota, your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. That win over Purdue, you're welcome, is definitely going to keep them probably closer to the bubble than they might have if they lost that game. Obviously, so far they've lost their first matchup against Wisconsin. They got the Purdue win. Other than that, they definitely need another solid win. They do have that home win against Michigan State that they got before the holiday break, which, depending on which way Michigan State goes, could really start to kind of creep up towards, that really good win. And I mean, having a win over Michigan State on your resume is always going to look good in the committee's eyes. But I think I agree that they're going to need something on the road to go out and have just a good, solid road win. I think that's part of the reason they're going to be kicking themselves about tonight. But I think they definitely have plenty of opportunity going to Maryland. I don't know how competitive they would be at Illinois, but we saw Illinois look very vulnerable here in the past week. So it kind of depends on how they respond. And then at Northwestern is another one. And then at Indiana, which I'm hoping Indiana just falls off. Never mind. So they definitely have opportunities to go on the road and get wins, but I think they definitely need to put some road wins on that resume to go with those big home wins.
Yeah, for sure. Russ is in the chat. Potential loss of Gary just means it's Tamanaga time. Yes. And it was Tamanaga time in this game. But my critiques remain of Tamanaga, and his ability to score is fantastic, and he's electric, but he just doesn't give you much else than that. 1 rebound in this game, 0 assists. I would have liked to see Tamanaga do a little bit more in this one. I think I'm like the only person on the planet that has anything bad to say about Tamanaga, because everybody loves him. And I love him too, don't get me wrong, but I also look at his game and say, there's room for improvement. So, all right, guys, that's all I got for this one. Thank you so much to Dakota and Brant for joining us here. We're going to have another basketball episode Sunday night. We'll talk about all the games going on that weekend. So, we'll have IU facing off against Wisconsin. We have Ohio State in their rematch against Penn State. Can they avenge themselves after their 18-point collapse in State College? It'll be in Columbus in this one. And then we'll have Michigan State and Illinois on Sunday. Their games against Maryland and Rutgers. That'll be fun to recap. So we got a loaded show next week. Thank you, Dylan. Love you too. So thanks guys for coming on. Thank you everybody for watching. Have a good night.